This is Laurie Kaye, and you're listening to No Good Music.
We have a special guest with us today. She was a big part of the RKO radio network and station KFRC back in the 70s. She's a writer and producer. In December of 2023, she released her first book called Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper. Let's all welcome to No Good Music, Laurie Kaye.
Thank you. And I do want to say that the entire title of my book is Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. And it's the story of my rock radio related life and career wrapped around what tragically turned out to be both John Lennon's last day on the planet and his last interview, which I co-conducted for RKO Radio. And I felt like I'd made lifetime friends with him and Yoko. But of course, technically that couldn't happen because he was shot and killed mere hours after our interview ended, which still makes me feel horrible.
Right, right. And we're gonna get towards the end. We're gonna hit that a little bit more in detail, and that is the climax actually of the book. Yeah. Laurie, my adult daughter and I are heading out for a vacation to the West Coast. First time her being out there. I thought of you. It's a coincidental that we're going to fly into San Francisco and then go all the way down the Pacific Coast Highway to uh, Santa Monica. Our first time at Santa Monica, my first time. And I know you've got a lot of memories there. Your teenage life, early 20s there at both those places. And yeah, what's the scene? What is it like there at Santa Monica, even close to Venice Beach there?
Well, when I was in junior high and high school, I went to the beach at Santa Monica and Venice all the
Yeah,
time, every day in the summer
right.
and after school when I could with my friends. And we had a great time and we body surfed and it was
Hmm.
just amazing. And the beach is a little different now and the pier
Yeah.
is a little different, but it's still very cool. And Venice, the walkway along Venice Beach is really great and it has great stores and live music. There's always somebody playing like there has been for decades. And
Hmm.
it's a lot of fun. I personally love the West Coast. And even though I've lived all over the country and kind of all over the world too, I came back to LA because I'm a SoCal gal and I'm
Yeah.
proud and I love it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I was a skater in the 80s. I know that a lot of the skating history and origins and surfing, of course, but a lot of skating was happening there, Santa Monica, Venice Beach. And so, yeah, hoping to see a couple skaters on the promenade as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when you come out, please let me know. And I'd love to autograph your book for
Yeah.
you
That'd be
and
great.
say hi to you in person and your
Yeah.
daughter too.
Excellent.
Cool.
Excellent. I'll let you know.
So
Absolutely.
Matt and I, of course, both read your book. We
Yeah.
simply love the book. I love a book with great. I'm a I'm a big movie, TV, music guy, celebrity,
And name dropper, bigger
and
than me.
name dropper. I go to a lot of autograph shows, and over the years, I've gotten to know some, minor people that are famous.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, what made you write your book? As far as I can tell, this is the first book you've written. Was this in your mind like years ago? Like it was written 2 years ago or a year and a half. But did you have this in your mind that maybe someday you'd tell these stories in a book?
Absolutely. And actually, I started writing it in 2020 when the COVID pandemic
Hmm.
put an
Okay.
end to my TV and radio and video production work for a while. And so I finally had time to start writing my memoir, 40 something years after I originally
Hmm.
thought about it. And I'd been planning to write one ever since John Lennon autographed my copy of my Yoko's book
Oh yeah,
Grapefruit for
yeah.
me because he'd written the introduction and he was just begging me to be able to autograph it and I said yes please and he said oh I love it when authors autograph their books for me. And
Hmm.
I said, wow, great. I'll do that
Yeah.
when and if I write one. And he looked at me and he said, great, Lori. And that
Hmm.
made me feel great and think, oh, I'm definitely going to write my book
Yeah.
and send
Yeah.
it to John. And of course, unfortunately, I didn't get to do that, but I
Yeah.
did get to sign a copy and give it to Sean.
Oh,
And
that's great.
yeah, so that, and hopefully he gave it to Yoko too. So that's at least part of it. And I wish I could send one to John in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great stories in this book because even though the title, you do have rock and roll name dropper and, leading up to the John Lennon interview, you start out, I think, talking about the interview and then go into your early life.
Right,
Uh,
which is a great snapshot for us to, we were teenagers in the 80s, and so to see the teen life in the, the 70s and see, when we were,
mhm.
at there, and it's a great snapshot into California, LA scene, 10 years before us. To see that, it's just exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah, that
Cool.
time period.
Hmm.
And I think as if it was a movie, how they would start out with the end and then go into, go back and then end with what you started
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
beginning. That's what I'm
exactly.
trying to say.
Yeah.
But I just love the way you put that book together. Um, Now, I found it interesting. We're going to go way back when you were babysitting. You would, I don't know how many babysitting jobs you had, but you would listen to music at the parents of the whoever you were babysitting. You would listen to their I guess albums.
Hmm.
You would you go through their record collections? I
That's a
mean,
good question.
Absolutely, because for the most part, they had incredible albums and record players and speakers, much more so than my dysfunctional family did, or that I was
mhm,
able to afford
Yeah.
by babysitting for 50 cents an hour. And one of the first bands that I was totally turned on to from a really cool couple I babysat for was Jethro Tull. I
mhm,
loved them right off the bat,
yeah,
and I got to see them within a year or so, and it was amazing for me. And thanks to KMET FM radio, I got turned on to so many other cool artists that I got to see fairly soon after. Everybody
mhm,
from David Bowie to Lou Reed, Neil Young, and so many other cool rockers, singers, songwriters, musicians. It was just amazing to be able to go to so many concerts. That's what I spent all my babysitting money
yeah.
on,
No, it's
concert tickets.
incredible, like the concerts you got to go to. Like when my first concert was Rush, and I was 15, but my parents were not. My dad never even listened to music, and
Right, right. And you
yeah,
talk about, dysfunctional family, not getting music from them. I don't think, I don't consider my family of origin to be dysfunctional. And yet I told Rob just the other day, I don't think my parents owned any albums or bought any music. Can you imagine? Like, like
Wow.
they just listened to classical radio on the radio,
mhm,
music on the radio. And that's just bizarre to imagine never going out and buying a
yeah,
recorded piece, LP, 8-track, cassette, anything. Like, whoa.
mm,
Well, the only thing my mother ever listened to was Frank Sinatra
mhm,
from when she was a teenager to,
Yeah.
right when she passed away. That
yeah,
was it. And she would not ever let me listen to her when she listened to music when she was around, like Elvis Presley or the Beatles or anything. She would
Yeah.
make
mhm,
close my door if I was
yeah,
in my room. And
mm,
and that's
yeah,
why I had the transistor radio with the earplugs since I was a
Yeah.
top
mhm.
because I could listen to it and not bother her.
Yeah. Thank God for the invention of that little transistor radio. I remember them.
My
It
mom
was
loved
amazing.
Yeah.
my mom loved Elvis though, and she liked more country music, Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton, but she instilled this love for Elvis that I have from a very early age. You know,
Right. That's so different
the
than my
Elvis
parents. Right.
Christmas album was
Yeah.
maybe the first album I ever heard of
Hmm.
Elvis. Um, but and I still have, not to be about me, but I still have my mom's the stereo console
Made of real wood
that I
instead of
first
plastic.
listened
Yeah.
to music on.
Wow.
Wow.
And Matt and I kind of upgraded it with a new turntable in there.
Yeah.
And it's the same speakers that were in the, like we didn't replace the
Yeah,
speakers.
yeah, it's still
It's
playing.
in my office downstairs, and I'll put an album on down there once I have a stereo, a really good stereo in here. But down there, I'll put an album on there, and it's just the memories, just and to hear music still coming from that turntable.
Wow.
So we're not going to go through all the awesome stories, that are in this book, but we do want to tease our listeners with some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
So you got to see the Stones, the Rolling Stones. Like how old were you when you do you remember when you saw them?
Yeah, I was 17 and it was really exciting. You want to hear how I got the
Yeah,
tickets?
yeah.
Oh, it was
One of a kind story
amazing.
here.
I entered contests a lot of the time on the phone on KMET FM, and I won Rolling Stones album. And because I won an album, they automatically made me an entry person in their contest when the Rolling Stones announced their Nicaragua benefit was coming up at the Forum in
Okay.
We remember that, yeah.
January 73. So the cool thing was I won tickets to that front row seats. It was amazing. And the extra cool thing was when I went to the station with the guy that I was bringing as my date to the concert that night. This was in the afternoon. We went to go pick up the tickets. I thought I was just going to be walking into the office and picking them up, but they said, "No, the disc jockey wants you to be on the air with him in his disc jockey booth." And it was B. Mitchell Reed, also known as the Beamer, who was my favorite. And he started asking me my name on the air and how old I was I excited about winning? And I said yes. And afterwards he said, "Laurie, with your voice and your attitude, you have got to consider an on-air radio career."
Wow.
And I went, "Oh my God." And
That's
so
so
I
comforting.
absolutely
Wow.
did. That helped me for the rest of my life.
That's amazing. Yeah, so fortunate to get those tickets like that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. While you were attending university in Santa Cruz, you got a chance to, or decided to, take some time off and go to the other side of the world. I've been to Hong Kong, so I know that Bali is on the other side of the world. Um, there's so much to talk about there, but musically, what's revealed here is that you, being very sick, I was always also once sick in Hong Kong, and death would have been welcome. I was so sick, but so I can imagine you were so sick there, but you found one cassette, and it surprised me when I'm reading the book. I'm like, oh, come on, really? But what this shows here, this one cassette or one album that you had, is the variety of genres that you are exposed to and enjoy. And that's what, on this podcast, Rob and I try to bring out such a wide range of music. Can you just tell us what that cassette was? What did you experience there, having to listen to the same album repeatedly?
Well, it was a Grateful Dead album, and I was definitely not a Grateful Dead fan. Not
Correct.
from high school, even though friends of mine were, I just wasn't into them at all.
Yeah, same here.
It's
And
a whole jump in culture, right?
there I was on Bali. I was living there because I was going to be studying Balinese dance for
Yes.
nearly a year, and I was really excited about it. And I was living in a home, but unfortunately, even though there was a little stereo and cassette player in the room that I was staying in, there was no music, and I couldn't go out and buy any cassettes because I was sick, like you were
Right.
saying. I was having some initial stomach issues and
Hmm.
stuff. So I picked up the cassette, which I was not familiar with, and it was Grateful Dead. And I thought, "Oh, I'm desperate. I want to listen to music. I'll just
Here it
put it
goes.
on."
Here it goes.
And I actually kind of liked it. So I became a sort of fan of the Grateful Dead, but I
Yeah.
Right.
still don't call myself a fan at all. And Did you want to know the story about later? What
Yeah,
happened?
there's something that goes with this, with the
Yeah,
Grateful Dead.
meeting Jerry
Yes.
Garcia. Is that what you're?
Yeah, you gave it away.
Ah,
Well,
shit.
so what happened was several years later, I was at an incredible punk rock concert. It was Iggy Pop, and I was so excited. And my date and I were jumping up and down and just dancing and
Hmm.
punking, and it was cool. And this creepy old guy came up to me and started bugging me and saying, "What are you doing? Why are you into punk?" And he kept bugging me, and I started insulting him to get rid of him and saying he was old and leave me alone. And he said, "Do you want me to get you backstage?" And I said, "Who are you, the great grandfather of somebody who works
Yeah.
backstage?
The
Leave me
grandfather
alone."
of punk.
Yeah.
And then my date looked at me and said, after the guy walked away finally, he
Mhm.
said, "Don't you know who that was?" And I said, "No, he
No.
was just some creepy old guy." And he said, "Laurie, it was Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead." And I was humongously embarrassed
Hmm.
because I didn't want to insult him, but he was gone. There was no way I could apologize to him.
Yeah.
And I felt really bad, but nothing I could do until several years later when I interviewed Bob Weir, the
Yeah.
guitarist
Hmm.
from the Grateful Dead for Rock Magazine. And I told him the story, and he laughed and laughed and laughed and said, "Have you ever seen our band?" And I said, "No, I've never. I always turned down tickets that were trying to come into me because I wasn't interested." And he said, "Well, come in LA because we're different now that
Yeah. Well, I
Jerry
think there was
Garcia has recovered." And so
I
I
re
went, and
oh, sorry.
I wasn't that much of a fan still live in
Right.
Yeah.
concert. So
I mean,
sorry.
I recall there's a guy in the band named Pigpen, if I recall correctly. I don't.
I don't even know the Dead very well.
Yeah.
But what I find intriguing about the meeting of Jerry Garcia at the towards the front of that punk show is you didn't set out to insult an old man that night, I'm sure. So he's asking you questions. He's engaging you. Why do you like this music? What do you find it alluring about, Iggy, what he's doing on stage? That's interesting that he would be the initiator and ask you those questions and engage you like that, trying to get that
Well,
out of you.
I had a question.
Hmm.
Is Were there other bands playing at this concert, or was it just Iggy?
It was just Iggy, and it was at the old
Okay.
Waldorf, which
Okay.
the great band manager and venue guy, who was a friend of all of us at KFRC, gave me tickets to, and it was just great. So, and
Okay.
that story's in my book. I'll let people
Yeah.
read
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
of the
Well, I
details.
think maybe the Grateful Dead was in town or something, and Jerry had maybe he didn't never heard of Iggy Pop before. Like, I'll check out this show
Right.
because
Lots of
obviously he
yeah.
didn't go there to see a punk show.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
So he was inquisitive, and we have
yeah,
to give that to him. That's
yeah.
that he was even there.
He
I
was no
wouldn't.
doubt there. He was no doubt there because of the guy who owned
Oh, okay.
I
Waldorf
gotcha.
because managed him. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
he probably just showed up because of that. Because the guy
On
said, "Oh,
on the way to
somebody,
dinner, hey, I'll just walk in here and then I'll go get
yeah,
something to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, when you won the Rolling Stones tickets and you said you went on the air with what was his name, the Beamer.
Yeah.
Um,
yes."
so at that point, did you always, or even before that, want to be on the radio, or was that the first time someone said that to you, and then you're like, yeah, that would be cool. That's maybe what I want to do.
Well, I'd been told before, actually, by a friend of mine's father, who was a big producer, that I had a good voice, so
Okay.
that I
Yeah.
should think
Yeah.
about doing something on the air. But I never wanted to be a DJ. That never occurred to me
Okay.
because I was so interested in newscasting. I wanted to be a reporter and news anchor. And that's eventually what I did become after my KFRC news department internship led to my news editor gig. And
Hmm.
then I also began writing and co-producing tons of rock radio specials, including what turned out to be the longest Beatles special for radio ever created in the
Hmm.
United States, which was originally called RKO Presents
Yeah,
the
let's go
Beatles,
into that.
Yeah.
14
RKO
hours
Radio
long.
presents Beatles.
But
Yeah,
what
tell us
happened
how that all came about,
Well, what
with that
happened
one.
was 17 hours it was expanded to after we did the original one. And they let me use the title I'd originally come up with, which was The Beatles from Liverpool to Legend. And it played
Hmm.
all over the world and it got great response, which was really exciting. And the way I was able to do that was when I was done with my KFRC news department internship. I was hired as the news editor for the news department. And my first day on the job, Dave Sholin, the music director there, said, Laurie, you're from LA. When you go back there, can you do me a favor? And I said, yeah, sure. What? And he said, can you go to radio station KHJ and pick something up for me? And I said,
Hmm.
sure. And I did. I went the next weekend because I was such a fan of KHJ as a kid. I couldn't wait to go there. And I went there not knowing what I was picking up. And it
Hmm.
turned out to be a huge box of original Beatles interview tapes,
Yeah. Yeah.
reel to reel
Wow.
tapes from the
Wow.
60s. So I
Yeah.
brought them back, and Dave immediately said, yes, we're going to do a Beatles radio special. And he didn't ask me to write it right off the bat. He asked my news director, a woman named Jo Interante, and she said, no, I'm way too busy. Ask Laurie. She's a great
Uh-huh.
writer. And Dave said, sure, Laurie, you want to write it?
And you
And
were
I
right there.
so I wrote it and I co-produced it, and it turned out great. And I got a lot of compliments, and I still do to this year.
Yeah, that
So,
sounds like an exciting time in your life, personally, professionally, to be able to do that. How much do you have an estimate? How much time, uh, months? How long was it in writing that original one? Just an
well,
estimate.
many months because
Yeah,
I was working full time during the day in the
right,
newsroom, which was a very long day. So basically, I stayed up all night for months
right.
and and was writing it. And most of the time, I stayed at the radio station in the newsroom and did research, read books, and started typing and slept for a couple hours finally, and
Yeah.
then had to get up the next morning and work. And as I say in my book, not only is it my life story, but it includes my encounter with sex and drugs and rock and roll,
Hmm.
which
Right.
basically is wrapped
Yeah.
around the
If that
Beatles.
wasn't a cliche already, that could have been the title of your book, but yeah. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's in there. People can
Yeah.
get that when they read it.
Right.
Now, is there anywhere we can listen to like that Beatles special or
Where can it be found? Yeah.
Well, technically, it's not owned by RKO Radio anymore because they're not
okay.
in business. They sold the company to another company that owns all of my interview specials and stuff. So
Okay.
I can't play them legally. But
Okay.
I will say that unfortunately, illegally, they are on YouTube, a
Okay.
lot of them. So people
They
listen
could
to them
be.
there.
You're not saying that they are. They could be on YouTube. I see
Yes.
what you're
Okay.
saying.
I didn't say
Yeah.
that. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks for correcting me.
Yes, yes. We don't know. We don't know.
One thing I love about the book is I didn't realize, well, I didn't know a lot about you, but when reading the book and talking about the people you interviewed, that the actual uh they would be transcribed in the book, and I love that. Like
Yeah.
the interview with George Harrison, Paul McCartney, and Linda, and I just love that. And I don't know if it was the whole interviews or if you took just part of the interviews, but you know, I just love that we got the feel that we were listening.
Hmm.
You know, while you were talking,
Yeah.
interviewing these people,
Hmm.
these legends.
I
Yeah.
put tons of their quotes in the book, but I
Okay.
couldn't put the whole interview
Okay.
because
Yeah.
that would have taken up twice
Yeah.
the
Oh,
length
yeah.
of my book. But the
Yeah.
really cool thing is, people who get my audiobook version that I self-voiced
Okay.
can listen to a lot of those quotes that
Oh,
I
okay.
did put in the
Oh, wow.
audiobook version. So they can hear George, they can hear John, they can
Okay.
hear Paul.
That's
And
great.
yeah, it's cool.
Now, even though you were well known at the network, I got the feeling you weren't really on the air except for maybe your voice was in some of the specials.
Promos or promoting
Uh,
specials and stuff.
but you became well known somehow. Your name. What I'm getting at is Matt's gonna get into this, but when within 1 week you had David Bowie call you and Mick Jagger. So I'm wondering how someone like that would know to call and maybe ask for you. Tell us how.
Right, David Bowie calling you, for instance.
Tell us the process, like
Yeah.
how.
Well,
Yeah.
the network and radio station music department director coordinated those kind of interviews for me
Okay.
with the record companies. So they
Okay.
knew to either come and meet up with me or call and ask for me. And both the David Bowie and Mick Jagger interviews were so huge and important for me. I was so excited. And they were for a very lengthy rock radio special I was writing for RKO and Drake Chenault, another company. They did it together called the Top 100 of the 70s. And it was super cool to be able to tell Mick Jagger about, wow, Mick, I got tickets. I won them to
Yeah.
your Nicaragua benefit concert. And that's why I'm working at a radio station and planning to
Right,
be on
right.
the air. And I told him the story with B. Mitchell Reed. And then he was so thrilled because he called right before I was supposed to be on the air doing a newscast. And I said, gee, Mick, do you want me to call you back after it's done? Or do you want to call me back? And he said, no, keep me on the phone. I'll listen to your newscast. And I was really nervous, but I did my newscast. And afterwards he said, wow, great voice, great story, great writing. So to be complimented by Mick Jagger was incredible. And then within a couple of days, David Bowie called, and it was so great to talk to him and tell him about the first time I saw him in concert, part of his Ziggy Stardust tour, and how much I loved when he first sang in concert what became my favorite David Bowie song, the Jean Genie. And I loved it. And I said, and I also love Fame. And he said, oh, and I loved writing and recording that with John Lennon. It was so fast and so great to work with him. So my whole conversation with David Bowie and with Mick Jagger was just obvious. They're favorite rock stars of mine. And I loved it.
Yeah, interviewing David Bowie. We're both Bowie fans, of course. Love, and feel sad for his passing. That's an honor right there to speak to him. Speaking of Fame, Fame takes me back to one of the 45s that I bought, 3 for $1 at Woolworths. Probably 11 years old, maybe 12, and just watching it go round and round on my little turntable. And, Fame and maybe Golden Years was the B-side. I'm not sure. But yeah, and learning years later that co-written and produced with Lennon. I didn't learn that for decades. Just amazing, the contact with Bowie there.
Yeah, I think mine was I think is the album called Let's Dance.
That was later, yeah.
When I had a awful eye accident and I was in the hospital, and my parents, like I said, they didn't know David Bowie from my parents. Honestly, I don't think could name the Beatles.
No, my parents either. Yeah, just no contact.
So I asked them. That's what I asked for while I was in the hospital. That's my memory of David Bowie.
They bought you the album and you listened to it in your recovery time.
Yeah,
it's awesome. That was early 80s. Yeah.
It was like 83.
Well, when you just said that you were in the hospital because of an eye problem, it made me think of my Ramones interview because I was set to interview the Ramones and I was a total punker. This was in 77 at KFRC, and I was so excited. It was going to be one of their very first Bay Area interviews. And I was thrilled, but unfortunately, I found out at the last minute that Joey Ramone couldn't be there because he'd had an eye accident. His eye had actually gotten burned while he was working on promoting a song before a concert. So he had to go to the hospital in New York and recover afterwards. So the only Ramones that I interviewed were Johnny Ramone and Dee Dee Ramone, and they were wonderful. I still had great conversation about punk rock and CBGB and
Mhm.
everything, and Sex Pistols, who I was about to see. And it was super cool. I just had a great time. I loved all the tons of times I've seen the Ramones. One of my favorite concerts ever was seeing them at a really small bar in
Mhm.
Seattle. And
Yeah.
they stood on the tables and jumped up and down as they sang.
Unlike anyone else. Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. Nobody else
Yeah.
ever played there. They were the
Mhm.
only ones. It just worked out great.
What's so notable to me as you speak of that, and punk in '77, being in the Bay Area and the LA scene allowed you, and writing in this book as well, and what we're hearing, and from even where we are on the East Coast, because we're an hour and a half north of Philly, uh, hour and a half west of New York, so we're between Philly and New York. Even so, out there, you're getting a jump on the scene by like a year. I mean, but
Mhm.
you're getting it so much earlier. If I would have to guess, I would have said, "Oh, that was probably 78, 79." But you're saying that, you were in touch with those things, and the people of LA, that was something special that they got
Mhm.
to be in that scene during that time. Something that the rest of the nation didn't experience.
Right. And in San Francisco, there were a lot of local punk rock bands, as
Awesome.
well as in LA. But I was living in San Francisco, so I got to see all the local ones, and they were pretty much opening for all the ones coming from New York.
Mhm.
And that
Hmm.
was really cool. And I got to see everyone from Patti Smith to Blondie to
Hmm.
Mhm.
Ramones. And then I did see what turned out to be the last Sex Pistols show, which was in
Okay.
San Francisco. Then they got back together years later, but
They're
that
actually
actually was
Yeah.
they're
not one
actually
of my favorite
touring
shows.
again.
Sex Pistols are touring
Yeah,
again.
Yeah.
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 exactly. Yeah.
And I saw a video,
Yeah.
I think it's from September. It was probably they didn't start the tour yet, but I guess they were doing a show or two.
Hmm.
And they actually, I don't know. It's three of the original members of the Sex Pistols, as the band. And then the singer, he was in some punk bands. He's a younger, guy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I heard.
I don't know. I'd like to see they're coming to Philly, I think at the Fillmore.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I like I don't like the arena shows too, even though, and we'll get into it, I
Yeah.
think at the end with, AC/DC. I'm wearing my shirt today.
Yeah. There you go.
So we don't want to give too much away in the book because there's a lot of good stuff in here. But one story that caught my attention was I'm a big fan of Mojo Nixon. Since Elvis is everywhere,
Right. You
all
grew
those.
up with Elvis,
Yeah.
so of course you're going to know about Mojo.
yeah.
So give us a little insight in the how you first met Mojo, like how you became,
How and where? Yeah.
and he did a favor for you. So I'd want you to kind of tell us about.
Well, my first wedding was supposed to be officiated by Little Richard,
Wow.
The
Wow.
who
Little
offered
Richard.
Yeah, he offered to officiate a wedding for me in the future while I was interviewing him for Rock Magazine in 1985. But when I called him a few years later to let him know that I was finally ready, he told me he wasn't doing it anymore. And
Oh
even
wow.
though I was so upset, I was then super lucky to have Mojo Nixon recommended for me and the guy I was engaged to. And
Hmm.
Mojo did a cool job at our wedding. I'd also been a huge fan of Mojo's great song Elvis is Everywhere
Hmm.
since it was released a few years earlier, which I used as the title of the chapter about Elvis Presley in my book.
Hmm.
And when Mojo read the original draft of my book, he really liked it. And he gave me a great comment that appears on my book's back cover. And that was a rock and roller coaster ride with a rambunctious raconteur sadly, Mojo died shortly after complimenting my book,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, but also, I should add that I used so many other titles of my favorite rock, pop, and musical songs as names for all of the 18 chapters of my book. It was one of the most fun things about writing it.
So not only did he officiate your wedding, it sounds like you actually were continuing to keep in touch with him, at least at some level.
Well, yes, and even though he didn't live in LA for a while afterwards,
Hmm.
and by the time I reached him saying that I'd written a book and I was mentioning him and his song in my Elvis Presley chapter and wanted to name it after his song, and he said, "Oh, let me read it," and that's when I sent him, and he loved it and gave me that great comment that's on the back
Mhm.
cover.
So you never met him before he officiated your wedding.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
wow.
He was very cool, and it was very sad to hear that he passed away
Oh yeah.
shortly after
Yeah,
that.
he was doing a cruise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he what happened. Yeah,
Hmm.
got a heart attack or
Yeah.
no,
Yeah,
I was very sad. That was a I think it was already a couple of years have gone by with that.
yeah,
There are many times in the book where you happen to coincidentally be picked or called upon. And I'm thinking about a time, it sounds like someone saw you, the way you were dressed, your vibe, and said, "Hey, do you want to go and be a partner with me? Be my dance partner." Um, and that led to some wild times. And I think it was just that you were picked off the street. This was for a dance contest, or maybe not so much contest, but it was an ABC special called The Rock and Roll Years. Do I have that right? Was it something like
yes.
that?
It was a Dick Clark rock and
Hmm.
roll series special, and at the Santa Monica Civic, where I'd been to concerts, they were going to have a dance contest,
Hmm.
and this guy picked me up for it. Said, "You look like you'd be a great dancer, and want to come with me and let's win the contest?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And I went with him. And Dick Clark and Chubby Checker were the ones who were picking the winners. And out of all the couples there, we were chosen as the winner.
Hmm.
And Chubby Checker said to me, "Are you a professional dancer, Laurie?" And I said, "No, not yet."
Wow.
And
I
it
am
was
now, is
sweet.
what you say, right? I am
Yeah.
now.
But the cool thing is just about almost 10 years later, I got a job to work for Dick Clark, writing his weekly countdown radio show. And the minute he saw me after his producer had hired me, he looked at me and said, "I recognize you. I remember you." And he went over to his file and took out a picture of me and my date and him and Chubby Checker and some of the
Yeah,
other
when I was
contestants.
reading that,
Wow.
that's just
It's good
incredible.
to have people remember you, that you made a good impression, that you did a good job, like you followed through with your work and you made a good impression on, Dick Clark.
But
And
for
the
him,
cool
that
thing was,
photo in his desk drawer
To have
or
it
filing
available.
cabinet, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's amazing.
the cool thing is that Dick loved my writing right off the back of his radio special,
Mm.
and he begged me to ghostwrite his weekly syndicated newspaper column too. Basically,
Wow.
be him, go to concerts
Right.
and write about it as though Dick Clark had been there
Yeah.
and that sort of thing.
Wow.
And interviews. And so I did. And he loved my writing. And he also asked me to ghostwrite his memoir. But I honestly didn't have time to do that. I was so
Hmm.
busy. And
Wow.
I did end up leaving his company
Hmm.
and wrote for magazines and for getting
Hmm.
into video and TV and stuff in New
Right.
York.
So you could have done that. It just didn't work out, is what you're saying, to continue there.
Right. If I'd been there longer, perhaps I would have written the book
Hmm.
for him.
Hmm.
But instead, I was so busy writing his weekly newspaper column and radio show that I needed to just concentrate on those.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We love the Beatles. I love the Beatles. I have a Beatles.
Yeah, look, take a look
I
here.
don't know if
Take a look
I can't
here.
even see her.
There it is.
Yeah. The Beatles
Cool.
The Beatles are
tattoo.
on me.
Um,
Wow.
so for me, it just hearing anything about George or Ringo and actually you interviewed three of the Beatles, but it sounds like you never interviewed Ringo.
Have you met him or talk? I mean, have you had a chance to talk to him at all?
Yes, last year at his 84th birthday
Oh,
party,
okay. Wow.
84.
at it was at an outside park in Beverly Hills, and he looked great and he sounded great talking to people, and I
Hmm.
got to give him a signed copy of my book. Well, not give it to him directly, to a staff
Okay.
member
Hmm.
Okay.
is
Yeah.
to give to him. So that was really thrilling, and I still hope that someday I do get to meet up and
Yeah.
talk with him and interview him, but I don't know that that's going to
Hmm.
happen. But
Yeah.
yes, all my interviews were wonderful with George. That was the first one, George Harrison, and
Hmm.
then Paul McCartney and Linda and their latest
Yeah.
line of Wings, including the late great Denny Lane,
Hmm.
which was wonderful. And then afterwards, George Martin, the Beatles producer, came to San Francisco to be interviewed by me about his book. All You Need Is Ears, which was
Uh-huh.
wonderful. And I still read it every now and then, and it was wonderful. And he was so complimentary to me about listening to the Beatles from Liverpool to Legend, my 17-hour
Wow.
special that he heard in England. And that was thrilling. And then slightly less than a year after that was our RKO radio interview with John and Yoko.
So your book's a great looking glass, I say, into the 1970s, the music scene.
Hmm.
And it does start with, like we said, with something you were quite very excited about. Anybody, we talked about this earlier, Matt and I,
Hmm.
how there's certain people that when you were younger, you kind of look maybe not as an idol, but they were just on a different realm. Even though they were human beings.
Hmm.
They, like I said to Matt, like they got up in the morning, ate cereal from a
Hmm.
regular bowl, and
And yet they're super talented and assertive and
yeah,
ambitious and so talented, like John Lennon.
yeah. And I think the way I could get the feel the way you interview people. You like we try to do. We like to have a nice atmosphere. We like to have some laughs. We're not very. There's some interviewers that try and dig deep. They try and
Hmm.
almost
You can't be too deep or too superficial. We're looking at the real human, the real humanity in interviews, and I think that you were able to capture that, of course.
yeah, like talking to a friend, like you're not trying to antagonize. I think some interviewers try to, no, I'm serious. They
Yeah,
try to get things out of people.
right.
And I think John, obviously, and Yoko felt very comfortable with you. And
Hmm.
I don't know how much you want to say about that day,
But
but
you certainly set the scene in your book. You set it as you set the scene up talking with Yoko and then John. It's touching.
It was amazing. And it was so cool to talk to them both because they'd gotten back together after
hmm
what John referred to as his lost weekend and
yeah.
told us was the worst time of his entire life, being away from Yoko for about 18 months. And Yoko was thrilled to be back with John and said, that their relationship was incredible and their spiritual bond was bigger than both of us. And
hmm
I just wanted to talk to Yoko so much afterwards about relationships because I hadn't had any good ones or lasting ones
Yeah.
before then. And I thought she and John could definitely help me out. So after the interview, when we made plans to get together in San Francisco in a couple weeks, I thought, oh, great, I'm going to get all their tips on relationships. But sadly, of course, that never happened.
Yeah.
A while before I had a lengthy relationship.
hmm
Yeah, yeah. So that interview was at his hotel apartment there in New York City, and just the again, like I just said, sitting there with Yoko, having John walk in, and just jumping right in, with that humanity, with that kindness, with that glow. The aura that is John Lennon, he brought that into the room with him, and it's special, and that comes through in
Yeah.
the dialogue, in the script, in the book.
He came into the room and he sat next to me on the love seat. So there
Yeah,
I
that sounds
was
great.
sitting inches away from my idol on a love seat where I was sitting because I loved the coffee table in front of it, this long glass
Yeah.
coffee
hmm
table.
hmm
And it was so cool. And
hmm
all throughout the interview, John would say things to me like, "Yes, love, exactly." He was so validating and so complimentary to me. And he
Hmm.
would push down his glasses down his nose and look at me and smile with his
Hmm.
eyes and
Wow.
mouth. And it was just
For our listeners, Laurie
wonderful.
just took her glasses down to the end of her nose and looked at us like John Lennon would. So she just, for our listeners, just that's what's happening right now.
Yes, that's what he did with
Yeah.
me. And he was great because it was so much fun to talk to him. And our um, other interviewer, Dave Sholin, uh, on our RKO team, the music director, also asked questions, of course.
Hmm.
And the record company executive, Bert Keane, who recently passed away, especially wanted to ask John about raising their son, Sean Lennon, who was 5 years old, because he had a 5-year-old son himself at the time.
hmm
So they talked a lot about John being a house husband and a daddy.
Hmm.
And it was
Yeah.
great. But after a while, I kept thinking, no, I want to hear about music. Let's
Hmm.
teach
Yeah.
music. So I said to John, I want to ask you about getting the urge to make music again, which is what I emphasized.
hmm
And John burst in with his super loud, funny, and affectionate reply saying, "Oh, it came over me all of a sudden, love. I didn't know what came over me." Everyone started laughing while I reacted confidently to his endearing response. "I know," I said. "It's like you were possessed." And he said, "I was possessed by this rock and roll devil, you know?" And I laughed and laughed and laughed. And he continued saying, "Was that your question?" He asked politely, "Did I interrupt you?" And I said, "No, you got it." And then afterwards, after answering another question of mine, he continued about music saying, "Just suddenly I had, like, if you'll pardon the expression, a diarrhea of creativity." That was how he created Double Fantasy.
uh,
So
yeah.
all that stuff I keep thinking of and
Yeah.
listening to you every now and then. And I
Yeah.
just loved talking to John Lennon.
Hmm. And he was the album had come out in November. The song Starting Over says it all,
Yeah,
I
it
think,
does.
because
Yeah.
I think he was starting over. And
hmm
what people might not realize is that they were still recording music for maybe the net, like one or two more albums.
Right after her interview that night, she states that they went to a recording session and came back, and so
Yeah.
I got that from you, Laurie. So yes, they were continuing to record.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the guys on my RKO radio team with me, the three guys,
hmm
were asked to please drop off John and Yoko at their recording studio session after the interview
Right.
because apparently John and Yoko's limo driver wasn't able to make it.
Hmm.
So the guys were going to the airport afterwards to go back to the
Yeah.
West Coast. So they said yes. And I wasn't going back to the West Coast. I was staying the
Hmm.
night in New York to be with a friend of mine. And when the interview was over and after they signed autographs and it was amazing and we made plans to get together in San Francisco in a couple of weeks at Yoko's favorite Japanese restaurant there.
Wow. Yeah.
And so then afterwards we went out and they got in the limo with the guys after we hugged and said goodbye
hmm
and drove to the recording studio, and then the guys went to the airport. The sad part is what happened afterwards was this creepy guy who'd been waiting in front of the Dakota and bugging people, bugging me
Yeah.
especially, and the
hmm
guys I was with before John and Yoko came out. And once they all left, this guy looked at me and started following me as I was walking up the block and saying, "Did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? What'd he say? What'd he say? What'd he say?" And I kept telling him to shut up and leave me alone. But he
Hmm.
followed me for well over a block. And I wanted to turn around and smack him. And I
Hmm.
threatened to. And he wouldn't stop following me. And he kept saying, "Did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? What'd he say? What'd he say? What'd he say?" Over and over and
Hmm.
over. And finally, I did act like I was going to smack him. And he turned around and left and
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
follow me anymore. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I should have gone to the security department at the Dakota and said, get rid of this guy. He shouldn't be there. He's going
Hmm.
to bug people. And, but
Could have
unfortunately, I
never
didn't.
known,
I didn't
I
want to go
mean,
back because I
Yeah.
didn't
yeah.
want him to follow me again.
Right.
But
Right. Hmm.
afterwards, I realized I definitely should have because they probably would have looked closer at him than I did,
Yeah.
seen that he had a gun in the pocket of the coat he was wearing, and they might have called the police to get rid of him. But later, when I found out that John had been shot, that just, of course, made me feel incredibly guilty. And I write all the details about that in my
Hmm.
Which
book.
you shouldn't,
So,
because you never
Hmm.
know. I mean, the guy could have very well have just wandered off
Hmm.
somewhere, just left. You did
Yeah.
nobody
And
nobody could
you
see.
did your best and you did your part at the moment. You recognize all those details, in the book, and what you just said of going a block, of uh, confronting him. Um, but yeah, you did your best and you did your part, certainly. Yeah.
well,
Thank
like
you
I
for
said,
sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I
That's a
wish I'd done better.
Yeah.
special time. I'm reminded, from the going from the great interview to what happened hours later. It's very tragic. But what I hold in my mind is thinking of several years ago, the movie Yesterday, and that special part where the lead character goes out, finds an
Hmm.
80-year-old John Lennon
Yeah.
at his home out there. It's just a beautiful home and a serene environment, and talks to him and asks him some questions and interacts with him. And through AI, through artificial intelligence, we see the face and the voice of John Lennon.
I don't think that's AI. That's actually a guy.
Okay, I
Did
didn't.
you see yesterday?
Yes.
Okay,
So I think that's actually the actor. He kind of maybe they did some prosthetics, but
okay,
yeah,
I didn't know, and we haven't
yeah,
talked about this.
yeah.
But seeing the would-be John Lennon, age 80, 81, right, something like that, that he was
Hmm.
portrayed, um, pretty amazing, and it's touching. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I wish he was still alive, of course.
Hmm.
Yeah. The
That's
things he would have done,
felt guilt for my entire
a lot of people we lost that, young ages,
Hmm.
Prince, a lot of people.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was shocking for me. I remember that I was, I believe, 14. I was 14 years old and coming back from school and freshman year, and
mhm.
hearing that, I'm like, what? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I was at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was horrifying.
Yeah.
So we have some other questions for you.
Sure.
You kind of hinted in the book, of course, after you interviewed John, and what happened, that you really didn't feel any more like what you felt before interviewing people. That kind of
Changed?
turns you off maybe
Hmm.
towards maybe we're thinking about doing something different. How long were you at the station? Because the interview with John was also something that I don't know if you were going to get fired or you
Well, I
got
don't know if we
reprimanded
got to see if
maybe.
we want to talk about that or not, or maybe that's something you don't want to
Well, what I
address.
should explain is that I had left KFRC shortly before the John Lennon interview
Okay. Okay.
because I got a great job offer from Drake Chenault, who I'd written Top 100 of the 70s for, along with RKO.
Okay.
They wanted me to produce and write a super cool rock radio special called SatCon 1. And they were going to pay me a lot of money. So
Mhm.
I ended up taking the job. And the thing is that right after the John Lennon interview, I mean, I was able to leave Drake Chenault for several days
Mhm.
to go to New York, although
Hmm.
I didn't tell them I was
Hmm.
going to do an RKO
Okay.
interview with John Lennon.
Yeah.
And after John Lennon was shot and killed, I had to come back and immediately write the radio special from the interview, which was John Lennon, the man, the memory, which made me extremely sad. And listening to the
Hmm.
interview made me
Mhm.
cry for hours and hours. So I didn't want to do any more interviews, especially
Yeah.
right away. I just felt too sad. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I already had interviews booked for the week
Hmm.
after with both Neil Diamond and
Hmm.
then Barry Manilow. And even though I was freaked out, they actually went really well. And the specials I wrote from both of them turned out great. And Barry Manilow said it was the best radio show he'd ever been on. So that made me
Wow.
feel good when he wrote that letter to me and
Hmm.
RKO and everything. And I was still, like I said, away from KFRC. And because I'd gone on the Today Show the morning after in New York, John Lennon was shot and killed. And they identified me as an RKO employee instead of a Drake
Uh,
Chenault employee. That when I
yeah.
got back to LA, Drake Chenault was furious at me.
Okay.
And
Wow.
that whole story's in my
Yeah.
book too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so I ended up leaving Drake Chenault. And that's when I started doing a lot of other jobs that I describe on air radio stuff. And then ended up working for Dick Clark,
Yeah.
which I've
Hmm.
talked about already.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we talked, you and I first talked on the phone a couple weeks ago, and we talked the other day. But we were talking a little bit about music and AC/DC. We're going to talk about. They just began their tour a couple of nights ago. I'm going to see them in Maryland. Now
Cool.
you haven't gone to see them yet. Like where are you
I'm
going to
so
see them?
excited. They're going to be at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena
Okay.
on April 18th, which is
Hmm.
next Friday night.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's a crazy place to see
Yeah.
bands because it's so huge
Right.
Okay.
and parking so odd. But I did see the Rolling Stones there with my husband a few years ago, and that was a
Hmm.
wonderful concert. So I'm thrilled to go see AC/DC because I am a hard rock, heavy metal fan,
Hmm.
as I was a producer and co-creator of
Hmm.
Metalhead, the
Yeah.
heavy metal music video magazine
Oh, okay.
for BMG, and that
Yeah.
was really amazing. So, and I do go see a lot of concerts still to this day.
That's
Hmm.
awesome. That is
Um,
totally awesome.
yeah, and seen everybody in the last few years from Jefferson Starship to Blue Oyster Club Cult,
Hmm.
the Black Crows, Heart, Joan Jett, and the Blackhearts, one of my
Yeah.
favorite bands.
Hmm.
Patti Smith with Lenny Kaye, who was a friend of mine when I lived in New York, and Blondie again, the
Hmm.
Steve Miller Band, the Rolling Stones, Elvis Costello, the Black Angels, Strawberry Alarm Clock, Buddy Guy, Steely Dan, John Fogerty, the Black
All great, all
Keys.
great bands.
Yeah, Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson, and Roxy Music, Wailing Souls. It's just, I
Hmm.
can't stop going to see
Yeah.
bands because I
Yeah.
love live music. I love being at a concert, standing up and
Hmm.
dancing or sitting. Either.
Hmm.
So you still like going to arenas? Because I like I swore off arenas a couple of years ago. We went
Yeah.
to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
For me, it was a different show that I swore
And
off.
we
But
even
yeah.
it was in Philly, but we even walked there from the hotel, so we didn't really even have to drive. But just I have a hearing problem. The just the people, but AC/DC I couldn't pass up. I've never seen them before. I know it's going to be their last tour. I'm like
Hmm.
positive. They're only You probably know this, but they're only doing 13 shows in the US. And then they're going over to I don't know if they're doing like a UK or they're doing other countries. And that's probably pretty much going to be it. So what is your feeling on arenas? You know, like you said, with the driving, getting out of the parking
Hmm.
lot. Oh, I mean,
Well, I'd rather go to a venue
yeah.
that's a better size, or even the Forum. I still love going to see bands at the Forum, or there's so many other venues in Los Angeles that
Hmm.
it's cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever
Awesome.
I can
We
do.
yeah. We have in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is near us. Actually, Matt lives
Yeah, you used to
Right.
live there, and I live there now in the Lehigh Valley, PA.
Yeah, they there's a casino. It's called Wind Creek, and they have an entertainment complex there. So I like going there because it's easy to
Yeah,
park. You have dinner.
right. And they got the
Yeah,
free stage that's every Friday night during the summer. They got the mid-range ones where it's, then there's the national well-known bands and places to go there.
yeah,
Yeah, Steely Dan was
yeah,
there not long ago.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
Oh,
then tonight we're going to see Marshall Crenshaw. Um,
in Jersey, not at Wind Creek.
Marshall
awesome.
Crenshaw.
Mm.
Heard of
Um,
him, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, he sings with the Smithereens every once in a while. They're a Jersey band, and they're doing a tribute to the lead singer who passed away,
Hmm.
I think in
Wow.
2017. And then there's a couple guys. There's a band called the Gripweeds, which is a local band, and the
North
drummer
Jersey.
who I've interviewed 4 times, we know each other. I didn't tell him I'm coming tonight,
Oh,
so and
so
I
yeah,
haven't seen him in person in a while, so that's going to be
hopefully
great.
hang out with
Anyway.
them.
But
Yeah. So yeah, it's still active scene if people want to get out to the small venues or the large ones. It's always
yeah,
good to get out and see live music because then the shows that happen, they never happen again. You'll never see them like that again.
I go see some great local bands too. A
Yeah.
friend of mine, Molly Hanmer, and her band, the Midnight Tokers. I
hmm
love them. And the Ah La Las are my husband's favorite bands. We go see them
Cool.
whenever they play. And the Long Shadows, which basically is a band that does cover songs. We love
hmm
going to see them, and they usually play in small venues. So it's
yeah,
always
Yeah.
fun.
yeah,
Great plug for all those bands,
mhm,
especially our listeners who are near or in LA.
yeah.
Cool.
Excellent.
And speaking of LA, before we go, we want to mention that you're going to be at the let's see, the Festival of Books on April 26th to 27th.
Is
I don't
that
know if you're
right?
going to be there both days or
It's the Los Angeles Times Book
okay.
Festival, and
hmm
it takes place at USC, the college campus.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to be part of the arena that the Reader's Magnet will have, and I'll be discussing and signing, selling my book, meeting up with people. I'm
hmm
really excited, and I will be doing that both days, Saturday and Sunday, April 26th and 27th. So I hope local people or people who happen to be in town then will come see me and say hi.
hmm
Excellent. A great time to say hi to you.
And I went on the website and I can't even tell you how many people are going to be like authors are going to be there.
A lot.
It looks like
Tons.
it looks like 1,000. I'm serious, maybe five.
They'll have to search to find you.
Well, that's why I said I'm at the Reader's Magnet Arena.
Okay, there you
They
go.
only have like 100 or so authors
Yeah.
in the
Mhm.
arena. So if people can go directly there, that's where.
Excellent.
hmm
Excellent.
Our listeners can purchase your book from your website. Is that correct?
Well, they can find out on my website where to purchase it from.
Okay.
Okay.
Everywhere online from Amazon to Walmart to
hmm
bookstores online, Barnes and Noble, or they can go to Barnes and Noble because they carry it in stock at most of them. And there's bookstores in Venice Beach and in
Okay.
LA, of course, that have it too, and all over the world. Actually, I'm popular at Waterstone's bookstores in England, especially the one in Liverpool. The manager really liked my book and has a
hmm
lot of
Excellent.
copies. People get it there. So yeah, so
Excellent.
people can get my book in many, many, many places. And hopefully, once they do, what I ask them to please do is leave a glowing 5-star online book review
hmm
on Amazon or Goodreads or their bookstore website, because that will really help promote it. And I definitely appreciate it.
Hmm.
Yeah, Matt and I, like I said, we loved your book.
Yeah. Both
We
left
left the
reviews. Yep.
reviews for you,
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Laurie, for spending time
Excellent.
with us today.
Thanks
Hey,
again.
hey, great to meet you virtually, and I'll be thinking of you when I travel from San Fran to Santa Monica.
Yeah, please do.
Yes.
Like I said, I'd love to autograph a book copy for you.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
All
Thank
right.
you
Thank
for
you.
listening to
Thanks
No Good
again.
Music.
Have
Today's
a great
interview
rest
was
of the day.
produced and edited by Rob J. Lilly and recorded via Zoom at the Did You Say
7
Studios in Washington, New Jersey. You can find No Good Music on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, Pandora, and almost anywhere you listen to podcasts. Intro and exit music by the band 99%.